we realized the most revolutionary act we could do was to heal ourselves. For our ancestors, for our daddies and grandpas, never got to heal. But for the future generations, that we didn't want to pass the pain on to them. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of the Círculo de Hombres and the National Compadres Network. There was a sense of shame, sense of vergüenza, because a lot of the woundedness that was happening in our family were by people that looked like us.
Yes.
And so at the same time that I was proud of my culture and proud of my family, there was a sense of, what are we doing, man? Why are we doing this, you know? And I didn't have at that time the historical or intellectual capacity to understand generational trauma, understand oppression, understand racism and its impact on our relationships and how it molds many, many men of color in a way that wounds us and then kind of puts us in a place that we pass the wounds on to our relationships.
When we understand sacredness and we understand groundedness and we understand wholeness, then we begin to understand that we are about everything. In our Nahuatl language, there's a word called Incloque Nahuatl. And Incloque Nahuatl means interconnected sacredness.
Hello, my name is Clay Boykin, and I am in search of the new compassionate male. I believe in the midst of these incredible times of change, a new compassionate male is emerging as the new archetype. And this podcast is intended to give voice to both men and women on the overarching topic of compassion consciousness in men. This week, I had the opportunity to visit with Jerry Tello. Jerry has appeared in Time, Newsweek, Latina, Lowrider magazines, and has received many major awards, including the Maria Shriver Annual Advocate for Change Award, the White House Champions of Change Award, the Presidential Crime Victim Services Award presented by President Bill Clinton and Attorney General Janet Reno, 2 California Governor's Awards, and the Ambassador of Peace Award presented by Rotary International. Jerry is considered an international expert in the areas of trauma, healing, men and boys of color, fatherhood, family strengthening, racial justice, racial healing, community peace and mobilization, and culturally based violence prevention and intervention issues. He is the co-founder of the National Compadres Network. He has authored numerous articles, videos, and curricula addressing the issues of fatherhood, male rites of passage, relationship and gang violence prevention, racial justice, teen fatherhood, pregnancy prevention, family strengthening, fatherhood literacy, and community peace. Jerry is the author of A Father's Love. He also recently released the award-winning book, Recovering Your Sacredness. Jerry is from a family of Mexican, Texan, and Coahuiltecan roots and was raised in the South Central Compton area of Los Angeles. Let's listen to that conversation.
Hello, world. It's me, Dennis, and we are in search of the new compassionate male. I get a chance to produce this episode along with the founder, Clay Boykin. Hello, Clay.
Hey, Dennis. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Today, our guest is the renowned Jerry Tello. And Jerry, where are you today?
I'm in Los Angeles today. I'm actually, here in the LA area that is originally Tongva Gabrieleño land. That's the native people that lived here. But I grew up in Compton, and I grew up in South Central LA, straight from the barrio, straight from the hood, and I live not too far from it. So,
tell us about 18-year-old Jerry Tello. Tell me who he was, who he thought he was. What year was that?
Well, let me begin, because I don't know, at 18 I had this consciousness, but I do have the consciousness now. And I want to begin just by acknowledging Creator and ancestors and all my people that I want to acknowledge my dad, Jorge Perez Tello, that is from the Tapilan, Coahuiltecan people out of San Antonio, Texas, generations there. I want to acknowledge my mom, Maria Susolaga Ramos, who was from Chihuahua, and the ancestors that go way, way back before that. That I may not have met physically, but I now recognize. And the 18-year-old me didn't recognize that they were in my DNA, didn't recognize that they had done so much already in terms of sacrifice. They had suffered so much, they had been through so much, didn't realize the resiliency that they had, that they inoculated me with. So at 18, I didn't have that consciousness. At 18, what I knew is that I wanted to go to college because to make my mother proud.
Yeah.
Because my mom was now a single mom. My dad had passed when I was 13, and I was in search. Not sure in search of what, but I was in search. I was had all kinds of feelings going on with me. I had come through the Watts blowouts that happened
Yes.
in the mid 60s. I was a teenager at that time and experienced that, and would walk out my house with my friend Tyrone. We would walk to school, and there would be National Guard on the corner there with their tanks, and I remember walking out and hearing the AK-47s click, and it reverberated in our bodies. So, as young males, we would front up, we would stand up, we would tighten up. I didn't realize that caused us to tighten up, and that tighten up sometimes never went away. It followed us to school. It followed me to sleep. It followed me in my relationships, and especially as a young boy, having learned, suck it up, man. Don't be showing what's going on inside of you, because you live in a neighborhood, that you have to survive, and sometimes you have to protect your little sister, so you can't look weak or vulnerable, and not understanding that the indoctrination by a system and by a society and by a community that made me feel like I was always on, that I was always being watched, that I was always being seen in a negative way, that made me have to be on all the time. So my breath was not even full. My sense of breathing was not even whole. And of course, the 18-year-old me did not understand that.
Of course
I
not.
did.
Of course not. I certainly didn't. Did you, Clay? Did your 18-year-old you
Not in the
have a
least.
and it all? None of us did.
No, and to hear you describe it so vivid, your experience and that tightening up, I could just feel it as you were saying that.
Me
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you. And even though we had different experiences, I told you
Yep.
before the show, I come from. I was born in Mexico, because in Mexico, people say you don't look Mexican, and I say you don't know what a Mexican is.
That's right.
Mexicans go from the lightest of light to the blackest of black. We are a very, very diverse culture. The brown skin, these are first people. This is first people that were here.
Right.
Way before the Colombian and the colonial times. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the Mexicano.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think what I learned, is that we lived in a society that looked at things very different. They judged you based on their perceptual framework, and especially as a brown man, I realized early on that I wasn't always welcomed in places. In school, I was already looked at a certain way. When I walked in stores, they would follow me like I was going to rip off something. In the neighborhood, the cops would slow down, and this was, me not doing anything, me and my friends not doing anything, and I remember an incident where me and my African American friends were walking down the street, and the cops slowed down, and 2 or 3 cop cars pulled up, and pushed my friends against the wall, and then asked me, my African American friends, they asked me, "Are you with them?" And my best friend said, "Man, go home, Jerry, go home." And they said, "Are you with them?" And I had to decide, just like that, was I with my best friends, or was I just going to go home? And I'm thinking, man, my mom's going to whip my butt, if I get in trouble. But my friend they were saying, "Are you with them?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm with them." And they threw me against the wall too. And so, you have these decisions that you have to make. And one of the things that, in doing in the path and the journey that I've been on. And I didn't realize, at 18 that I went to college, wanted to study psychology, because I wanted to help. But what I didn't realize is I was really in search of how to heal my family and how to heal the wounds that already had been bestowed on me, not because I did anything wrong, but because I looked the way I looked in a society that did not value, people of color or people that were not, that did not go along, if you will, with the indoctrinated program.
Exactly. How were you able, Jerry, to know that you could possibly make a difference and begin on the path toward the compadres and the path toward the heart, the path toward the opening, so that you could, because there has to be a sense of hopelessness that would be easy to fall into.
Yeah. Well, and fortunately, creators and ancestors are very brilliant and put in your path what you need. And so the other side of the coin, living there in Compton, as I grew up in a family in which we had traditions and customs and ways, and I had a little grandma that every morning, abuelita, every morning at 4:30 in the morning, she'd get up before she did anything and go in there was a little nook in the hole in the wall, and she had her candles and her Virgen de Guadalupe and her saints and all of their pillow on the floor, and she would pray. And she would begin to pray every morning. And you could almost tell how many problems we had, because the more problems we had, the longer she'd pray, right? but after she finished, and I thought it was, why are you waking up so early, Grandma? Why? You don't have to go to school. You don't have to go to work. Why don't you, get up late? No. I didn't realize that was a sacred part of the day. That 4 o'clock was when Grandmother Moon and Grandfather Sun, when they interlocked, when that masculine and feminine came together, when the creation for the day began. And so my grandma intuitively knew that and connected with the ancestral spirits. But after she finished praying, she then came to the room where all of us kids were sleeping. And she blessed us all up. She gave us a bendición. She blessed us all up. And she blessed the dark-skinned ones, the light-skinned ones, the good-looking ones, the ugly ones, the stinky ones, the ones that were good in school. She didn't care. Mm-hmm. And what my grandma was teaching us at that time is that we were all sacred, that we were all a blessing. And she was inoculating me, not only with a sense of that I was a blessing, that God doesn't create junk, but she was showing me an example that if you live in a blessed way, the blessings can come to you. And whenever you need to, Miko, you call to me. And so when I went out that door, I had gotten 3 and 4 blessings already, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing is I learned in my house from my mom and from my dad. My dad was a very generous man, even though he was loud talking and had his wounds. Both my parents taught me que estamos aquí para servir la gente. We're here to serve people, and they meant it literally. People would come over, we'd have to serve them. We'd have to get up. We'd have to, people would come over on a Friday night, unexpected, knock on the door. We're there, my uncle and aunts and their 6 kids, and we had to move out of our bed. We made room. So this was not out of me, out of this young man that was going to college. This was an example from my culture, from my way of being. And let me just say, it wasn't only my household. When I went down to my friend Tyrone Mosley's house, his grandma would bless me up too. She did it different. She said, bless you, baby, bless your child. She blessed me like that. She blessed me up in her way. And then she said, come on, baby, let me give you some of Miss Mosley's food. She'd take me in the house like I was hers. So, so I was blessed in many ways. I saw examples of grandmas and families in that Compton area where they said it was high risk and dysfunctional. No. I saw blessing people. I saw sacred people, men and women giving me examples. Obviously I saw the opposite too. I saw drugs. I saw violence. I saw gangs. I saw guys on the corner, smoking and shooting up heroin. I saw all that too. But at least I had the balance. And,
exactly.
And what that gave me is the ability to choose. Yeah. But what burdened me is that some of those wounds were in my family too. Mm-hmm. I saw my father's wounds. I saw
the ancestral wounds that we have, right?
And I didn't understand those. I didn't understand, my father's wounds. I didn't understand my father's shame. I didn't understand my father's burden when he died at 13. And so what I now understand is that by the time I was 13, he did as much as he could do. But then at 13, I had to carry that on and try and figure it out. And I was 13, and I think a lot of young boys have to try and figure it out, to the extent that when my dad died, I didn't cry. Because I was told that, you suck it up, man, and I played it off. My friend said, I'm sorry you're dead, man. It's part of life, dude. No, man, but that's your jefito, that's your dad. You know what, man, maybe it's better. But inside I was hurting, but you know what? I had forgot how to cry. And what I realized is that what life had done to me, what the society had done to me, and even some of the internalized oppression in my own family and culture, because they had internalized a lot of these oppressive ways of having to survive 24/7, having to be frozen 24/7 just to survive, that you believe they're part of your culture.
Right.
The domestic violence and the harshness and the men not sharing feelings. I thought that's part of my culture. That's machismo. But what I began to understand later, no, that's woundedness. That's internalized oppression. That's generational trauma that has come from generations of people trying to take our spirit away.
Yeah.
And so what I didn't understand is when they put me on this journey, it was really a journey to recover the sacredness of who I was, to recover the manhood in me that included all the elements of humanity.
Jerry, it blows me away. I love the way that you bring the twin pillars in, that we have the societal and the systemic oppression, and then we have the familial and our own oppression that we carry within our own families, of the stories we continue to tell. And they're both things that must be overcome.
Well, but what I now understand is the trajectory of that, how those came to be. Because society would say, you're like that because you're brown, it's your culture. I said, and now I've understood, no. If I go back to indigenous communities, and I have a lot of, because we have a center that we do a lot of healing, so we bring indigenous healers, and I see men, indigenous healers, one of my elders that just passed, the Marcelino. I saw this man that was a healer, so gentle, so compassionate, so open, so giving, so loving, freely. But he lives in the hills. He lives with his people. He has not been contaminated with all of these other. So I've been able to see and experience what we call sacred manhood. And sacred manhood, what we've come to understand, in our traditional culture, my indigenous culture, we talk about 4 directions. We talk about the direction of the East, which is the masculine direction. And we talk about that direction of the West is the feminine direction. And the direction between the masculine and the feminine is the child direction. And then the direction on the other end is the elder direction. And what I began to understand from the indigenous point of view is that even though we're standing in one direction, I may be a man standing in the masculine direction. For me to be whole, sometimes I need to go to the feminine direction and pull the feminine out of me. Sometimes I need to be a child and play and laugh and say, I'm afraid. And sometimes I need to be wise. See, and that's the healed sacred manhood, where we can be flexible to go in what other direction. The same thing for women. Women, sometimes they may be in that feminine, but sometimes they need to come to the masculine direction and say, you know what? And I saw it in my sisters. My sister would say, you don't mess with me, I'll kick your ass. And my sister would, would be hard like that because she needed to be, right? But so I think that the society has methodically and categorically has tried to put us in a direction and say, you stay there. That's what oppression is. That's what racism is. That's what homophobia is. That's what all the oppressions are, is getting us stuck only in one place and believing that's who we are in a wholeness, and it's not.
One of the things that we're discovering, says Dennis, talking right over Clay as if
Go
he can,
for it.
because I'm sorry, I just got to talk.
I'll follow up.
is that the jailer is also in jail. The people that are part of the oppression are also in jail. This is a complete. It's not. It punishes all. We all lose.
I want to pick up on, you were talking about the East and the West and the masculine and the feminine and the child and the adult. And that's intriguing because, Dennis, you and I have been talking, about fear and love and darkness and light. And this, what you're talking about, Jerry, it kind of overlays that, and the element between the child and the elder thing. In that transition, that has been lost, I believe.
Well, I think it's there. It's there in all of us. And so when I often am in conversation with men, I often say, I'm not here to teach you anything. I'm just here to remind you.
Yeah.
Just to remind you of who you are. And to give you, if you will, if you needed permission to be who you need to be, and to undo, if you will, the chains, sometimes the chains, or the narrative that says you can't go there, because then you will be less than, or you'll be seen in negative or deficient or less than whole way. See, and when we begin to understand that all of this is purposeful. I mean, society has created these oppressive layers and systems and even analogies. And I'll come back to what you said, Dennis. Society has created jails. There's no jails. I mean, jail and jailer. What were the jails for? I mean, the reality is that society has created all these narratives, and so we feel that we need to adapt to them or adopt them, or if we want to survive, then we need to be the jailer, if you will. But the reality is that when we understand sacredness and we understand groundedness and we understand wholeness, then we begin to understand that we are about everything. In our Nahuatl language is a word called Incloque Nahuake. And Incloque Nahuake means interconnected sacredness. So, right now, it's manifesting very, very, very profoundly. In my tradition, we are said to be in el sexto sol, the sixth sun, right? And that sixth sun is a time of transformation. It's a time of the feminine. So the feminine must lead now. If we are to really heal, we must all move to our feminine. Doesn't mean we abandon the masculine, doesn't mean we abandon the child or the elder, but we must be willing to sit in that feminine. Now, for some of us, there's pain there. For some of us, there's struggle there. For some of us, there's some memories there. For some of us, we remember harm that we've done or harm that's been done to us. But, the fear has caused us not to be able to go there. But it's necessary for us to not only be in our feminine, but to look to the feminine. And I mean, the women have, since the beginning of time, taught us these ways, taught us these, and I want to thank, the women that have, carried that medicine, but also have given us space,
yes,
have been patient with us.
Oh, thank God.
I've worked in the area of domestic violence and sexual assault for many years, as a clinician, but also I was one of the first men that was hired at the East LA Rape Hotline way back in the early 80s. And I was the only male, and I would go to conferences on, that they were talking about domestic violence and sexual abuse, and they would kick me out of the conferences because I was a male. And there's a perpetrator, get him out, just because I was a male, But I began to learn, the victimization that has gone on to women, and it's still going on with women, But they gave me a place, and I had to earn the trust. And a lot of men don't understand that, the harm that we have done, to women, the harm that we've done to society. And then all of a sudden, okay, now we get woke and we get clean and we get sober. And now, okay, we got a consciousness and we expect everybody to trust us and love us. And wait a minute, there's a process,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in the barrio, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, you don't just get accepted into a neighborhood. You don't just get accepted into the clique or no, you got to earn it. It takes some time. So that journey, and so I really want to, acknowledge the women in my life, my grandmas, my mama, my sisters, my companion, my daughter, my granddaughters, all, and so many women in this movement that have taught me, that have blessed me, that have healed me, that have put up with me when maybe I spoke too much or spoke out of turn, and that taught me that way too, and because of that, it opened up a portal in me and gave me time and space to be able to go in the feminine and not be afraid. You talked about the duality. We have the duality of the night and the day, right? That light, that we learn lessons, and in the darkness we learn lessons. And many of us are afraid of the dark, But there's certain lessons you can only learn if you're willing to go into your shadows, to those shadow parts of you. And so, we that's the work that we've done. And in doing this work in communities for many, many years, now almost 50 years, I was working with families and working a lot with, families of color, and especially, Spanish-speaking families and bilingual families, because not there were a lot of practitioners. And what I found is that, there was no programs. There was nothing, especially for men, and especially for men of color. What they did is they locked us up, or they diagnosed us and drugged us up, right? Or they kicked us out of the family, or they deported us with all of that. And it would frustrate me and the friends of us that were working in this area. And so, we got very frustrated and decided, we're not going to wait for somebody else to develop a program. We're going to do it ourselves. And so myself and a good friend of mine, compadre Dr. Ricardo Carrillo, who was working also in sexual assault and domestic violence, said, hey, let's come together and bring some men together to develop, our own programs. They're not going to fund us. Who cares? We'll do it ourselves. And there were a number of us in the field. And so we put out we sent out a notice, a flyer. Back then they didn't have email or, all that stuff. You had to actually send it literally out in snail mail. And we sent it out, and we knew enough, because we had grown up with this, that whenever alcohol was present or drugs were present, things shifted and changed. And at baptisms, when alcohol was present, it ended up being not good. When parties happened, there was always a fight. When there was drugs, people began to fight even more. So we knew enough that we put at the bottom of the flyer, no alcohol and no drugs. And what happened with that is several of my friends says, man, we're spending a whole weekend. We can't even drink, fool. Not even after the meeting. How about just a 6-pack? I said, no, dude. Man, the whole weekend. And what I didn't understand at that time, is that, and we see it now with this whole pandemic, is there's no health care. There was no Obamacare. There was no services for us. So people coped with a can of beer or smoking a doobie or, whatever they did, or
exactly, self-medication.
And so to them, saying a whole weekend without drinking, man, we're going to talk about some heavy stuff. I don't know if I can do that. And so a number of my friends said, no, man, I can't go. And they made the excuse, because there's a football game I want to watch on Saturday, or my wife won't let me go. But what I realized is they were afraid to really, come together. We had never come together like that as men, unless we're going to a party or going to drink or going something like that, But 19 men showed up. And we knew enough from our grandmas and from our traditions that you always start with prayer, and so we began, with prayer, and we asked the grandmas and the grandpas, the ancestors, please help us. We don't know what we're doing. We want to develop something to heal the men, and
But there was another part of us too, another part of me, and it wasn't only developing programs. There was a sense of shame, sense of vergüenza, because a lot of the woundedness that was happening in our family were by people that looked like us.
Yes.
And so at the same time that I was proud of my culture and proud of my family, there was a sense of, what are we doing, man? Why are we doing this, you know? And I didn't have at that time the historical, the intellectual capacity to understand generational trauma, understand oppression, understand racism and its impact on our relationships and how it molds many, many men of color in a way that wounds us and then kind of puts us in a place that we pass the wounds on to our relationships. So we began that circle with that prayer. And all we asked men to share, we went around, you know, because a lot of us didn't know each other. And all we said is, who are you, man? And why are you here? Give us your intention. So at least we get on the same page. And the second brother in, you know, shared who he was and where he was from. He was a social worker. And he says, well, my intention, I want to help the community. He says, but you know what? What's on my mind right now is I'm losing my family. I don't know how to love my wife. I don't know how to love my kids, man. He says, I'm a good social, I'm a good provider, but I don't know how to love. And he says, and I'm going to say something that I've never said to anybody before. I've never told anybody. Never even said it out loud. But I was abused as a kid. Not by my family, by somebody else. I was sexually abused, and it's stopped me from knowing how to love. I'm afraid to love. And he began to cry, and not just little cry. He began to that cry where you feel the spirit just opening. And when he did that, it touched all of us. You know, be careful when you ask spirit, when you ask the ancestors to come in, because they're going to come in.
They mean it.
And they came in and they opened us all up, and we all began to cry. And it was like a shock. What the hell is going on here? Stuff is coming. I never, you know. See, I mean, we were professional. We know how to facilitate. We're therapists, social work, but to see other people look like us, vulnerable like that, it just shifted everything. And then it shifted that gathering, but every man after that shared what was going on with them and their wounds. And what we realized, we finished that circle, is that we were all messed up. That in spite of us being professionals, lawyers, social workers, community advocates, you know, teachers, that what we had never dealt with, we had bought the lie. And the lie was, go to school, get your education, become a professional, you know, get your family, move out of the neighborhood, and everything will be fine and fair and equal. No. You know, what we realized is we had to do our own work. And so we realized the most revolutionary act we could do was to heal ourselves. For our ancestors, for our daddies and grandpas that never got to heal, but for the future generations that we didn't want to pass the pain on to them. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of the Círculo de Hombres and the National Compadres Network. We made another commitment.
What year was this? So we can ground it.
1988.
Wow.
And we made a commitment to that, but we also made a commitment that we were going to pass these teachings, the true teachings and the healing way teachings, on to the next generations. And that's how we began. And we began, and you know, we've been gathering year after year. And now we have all kinds of gatherings, and we have círculos all across the country of men. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of men and boys and grandpas, and sometimes generations where the great grandpa and the grandpa and the father and the son all in the same room. And I've seen grandfathers kneel down in front of their sons, grandsons, and ask for forgiveness. I've seen healing go on in front of me. And now, over these 30-some years, I've been able to witness sacred manhood in actions and in process and in practice and in changing the narrative. And we see now, you know, partners and wives and, you know, saying, hey, go to the retreat. You need a tune-up, you know, when we begin to get back into that narrative. So, and, you know, now we're an organization that has a large trajectory curriculum. We do rites of passage work. We do work with young fathers and and even men that have violence as a wound issue. We work with them. But we do a lot of work in systems, because even though we've done this work for so long, we don't get acknowledged as an organization. Now a lot of people don't even know of us, and now people, okay, we're going to do manhood work and do this stuff, and it's like they think it's the first thing, but because it's from a group of Latino men, again, the racism and the oppression were not acknowledged. So but we have been doing this a long, long time, and there's a lot more work to be done.
Jerry, let me ask you to say this again. It's the National Compadres Network. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And that began in 1988.
Formally. I mean, we were gathering before then.
Mm-hmm.
And my work, actually began in 1974 when I came out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
I was drafted in the military out of college and came back.
For people that are listening to this, we'll have it both in video and in just audio. How could somebody connect in with the network?
I mean, you can go to our website, nationalcompadresnetwork.org. And you can. There's ways to connect there. We also have a podcast as well that comes on. It's called Healing Generations, and we talk about healing generations that way too.
That's wonderful.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. You mentioned something a minute ago about rites of passage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, traditionally in our we recognize in traditional indigenous culture that we go through different phases in life, even physiologically. Our bodies shift and our minds shift and our spirits shift. And in traditional communities, there were people that guided you, the people that helped you along, that picked you up, that made you accountable, if you will, with love and compassion. But also walked with you. And the most important part is that last part, walk with you. Because we live in a society that makes you believe you're an individual, you need to do it on your own, pull yourself from your bootstraps. It's a very Western, patriarchal way of doing it. And in our traditional society, you don't do anything alone. It all comes with some guidance. And so a lot of our work is generational. And that rites of passages, when you begin to cross that bridge, and there's a story that we tell about, that physiologically it becomes a time in which, of course, girls, their bodies change, and it's very evident because they go through menses. And for women, because women are taught early on that you're supposed to take care of one another, nurture. They're given dolls to play with and how to change and do all this. So there's a process of saying, you are a nurturer. Yeah. This is your role, right? Well, boys are given trucks and guns and all kinds of other things. So when it comes time, for women to cross the bridge, there are women there. I mean, to guide them. And if you take a baby in a function, women will automatically, let me hold the baby, come here, they automatically will do that, right? They go to the bathroom together. They collectively do things, right? And so when the girl gets ready to cross the bridge, there are other women that are ready to guide that other woman. But for boys, right? When you get to that rites of passage bridge, especially in a society that is about oppression and patriarchy and says you need to do it alone, right? Then if you don't have your traditional ways and you believe, no, you don't need to walk with nobody. You do it by yourself. I'm doing it by myself. Well, I don't need nobody. It's about me. I can handle it, And what what I realized at 13, my father literally died when I was 13, right when I'm crossing. And even though I thought I can handle this, inside him I'm saying, who's going to teach me? My dad wore hats. And I'm saying, who's going to teach me how to wear a hat, how to clean a hat, who's going to teach me what to do with my anger? Who's going to teach me how to be a good partner? Who's going to teach me what to do with my fear? Who's going to teach me? And of course, there were men in the community. They were out there. They were getting high and smoking blunt, and some of the guys from the neighborhood, hey fool, come on here, I got you. But they were wounded. And so there's a story that we tell that the mother that takes her son because the dad has been locked up or deported or he's wounded himself, the mother, a lot of times mothers take their sons to the bridge. We're afraid to say when we start, when we realize our body's changing, we hide ourselves when, and we don't want to tell our moms, hey, something's showing up in my underwear. We don't want to say that. We're not going to say that. So we kind of mysteriously try and figure it out. But the mother's noticing a change. And so if we take this narrative story, the mother takes her son to the bridge for a man to guide them, and there's no men there.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks on the bridge and she sees at the middle of the bridge, there's men in the middle of the bridge, but they're struggling like the guys on the corner. And because of their anxiety, they're drinking or getting high, or they're fronting up, or they're bragging around. And mom calls to the men, hey, well, why don't you take my boy across this bridge? And the men, because they're wounded and they're not in their rooted teachings, say, that's not my boy, that's not my son. Why should I take him? Because they've learned the indoctrinated teachings of Western society. And the mother says, what do I do with this boy? And so one of the men that's a little braver says, well, you can leave him here. And so she leaves her son with the men that are struggling and stuck. And what does that boy learn? False teachings, wounded teachings. But the mother goes back to the village. And the other women are away. Did you take your son? Did you find? Yes. But I found these men that were drinking. They were, talking bad about women. They were fighting among themselves. And so she turns to her daughter and she says, be careful with the men. Don't trust them. And as she's telling her daughter this, her little 5-year-old boy is right there listening. And the 5-year-old boy hears, don't trust men. So this 5-year-old learns, don't trust myself. Don't trust my feelings. Don't trust my spirit. Don't trust my instinct. And he becomes lost. And so somebody, when you cross that bridge, has to bless you up, has to indoctrinate you again, has to remind you of your sacredness, and has to say, let me give you some teachings. Let me tell you how to be. And we have taken in our Joven Noble program, our Rites of Passage program, young men who are looking for someone, and I'll call to one of my staff members now, Ozzie Cruz, who came to us at 15 as a teen father. He was a teen father at 15, and he came into our teen fatherhood program. And he came there because he was referred by probation. He was all tatted up, already clicked up in the neighborhood, but he had a kid. And he didn't want to do what his father did. He didn't have a relationship with his dad. And so even though he was in gangs and all that stuff, there was a spirit inside of him that says, I want to be different. That spirit lives in all of us, even the wounded ones of us. And so probation sent him to us. And he was just going there to fulfill a probationary requirement. But when he got there, he says it's the first time that a man had called me mijo, son. Mijo, come on in. Sit down. You want some pizza? He says, and it did something to me when I heard men calling me son. He says, and so I went back for that calling and for the pizza too. He says, because the pizza was good too, right? And he went through the whole program. And then after it was over, he had finished his probationary requirement. He asked, can I come back again for the next round? I said, well, dude, we don't get paid for you to come back to the next round. I know, but I'll help out whatever we allowed him to come back. And after the next round, he said, can I stay around? And he stayed around so long, we had to hire him, right? and Ozzie Cruz has been with us for over 20 years. He's one of our leading trainers all across the country, a great father, a great grandfather. But he needed somebody to call him son in a loving, compassionate way. He needed somebody to give him space where he felt sacred. But he needed somebody that would guide him and pick him up. And even when he messed up, not throw him away. Because that's what society does. It takes young men that mess up and locks them up. And we have a whole high rate of, especially black and brown men that are incarcerated. We have a higher rate of black and brown boys that when they have behavioral problems are diagnosed and medicated at a 7-time higher rate than white boys. And so we need men to guide and to teach, but before you go there, you got to do your own work. And that's why I'm still doing my work. We're all still doing our work, and we're on this path to pass it on and to change narratives and to recapture the sacredness of who we are as men, notwithstanding the women, because we are in reflection of the feminine and of the women and of the elder, and really responsible for the next generation of the children.
Can you dig into the word compadre
Mm-hmm.
for me? Because I need to feel that that word. I need to put some meat on the bone for me to help me to understand the word.
Yeah. Well, padre means father or means parent. Compadre means extended parent or play the role of a parent. And so in all traditional indigenous families, you have extended kinship. We call it compadre. But other people will call it, fictive family or whatever, that extension family. We got brotherhood, all of those things. So in every culture, in the true indigenous culture, you have that set of extended kinship. And we begin to understand from indigenous culture that we have many people playing the role of father, right? That maybe it is just that your father gave you the seed and began your life, but I'll go to a teaching that was given to me by one of my African American colleagues. They said we went back to Africa, and he was researching some of the aspect of kinship and fatherhood, and he was talking to this young boy, and he says, "So, do you have a father?" He says, "Yes." "Where is he?" And he pointed over there across. He says, "That's my father right there." And he says, "But I saw you talking to this other man over here down the street." And he says, "Well, that's my father too." He says, "Well, who's the guy over here that gave you that fruit?" "Oh, that's my father." And he was very confused by this guy saying, "I got all these fathers." And so he asked the tour guy, he says, "Well, why is he mentioning all these men as father?" "Oh," says, "that's our tradition. All of them are his father. You see the disheveled man over there in the corner? That's his biological father. But he got wounded at war. But he still honors him as his father and realizes that because of his wounds, all he could give them was life. But he still honors him for that. These other men have other teachings and other medicine to give him. And he will be responsible for all of them, but he also recognizes that he must be a father to many, not only those that he gives seed to. And we have lost that in this society. Compadres is, a lot of young people call me tío, call me uncle, or call me tata. Now that I'm older, they'll call me grandpa, right? and so if you come sit in our circle, you will become a compadre. We will call you that. You will be our brother. You will be in that. We also expect you to act in a certain way.
Absolutely, there comes responsibility, right?
Right? Yeah, yes, definitely. So that sense of belonging to a kinship is real important, and the remolding or remaking of what society and its woundedness and its capitalism and its patriarchy and its misogyny and all of this based on, this world is not about lifting people up. It's about lifting individuals up based on worth and personal gain and power.
Patriarchy.
But it's also and when we think of patriarchy, we think about men, but women and people from all gender can do the very same thing.
Right? Patriarchy is a system. It's not a gender.
Yeah. Right. So we must reclaim, if you will, that sense of interconnectedness, and with that, I want to just acknowledge the generations of women that, in spite of the men being wounded and not being around or being incarcerated, or that have done a wonderful job, that have done an amazing job of teaching us, of accepting us, of sometimes kicking our ass and making us accountable, holding a mirror in front of us, but nevertheless not abandoning us, right? And I have to I acknowledge my partner. Susana, who, really she's the one that carries the medicine.
Yeah.
She's the one that carries the medicine. I speak a lot and I'm the one in the front, but the reality is that, this morning when I got up to do my work and going to come to this, she gave me a blessing. She blessed me and gave me, really the medicine to be able to speak with grace. So that duality is important,
Do you see, Jerry, here in 2021, we're connecting via the internet. We're getting a chance to have an amplification of voices and an amplification. It feels to us, or at least from where we're looking at, that there is a willingness to hear in a ways that there was not willingness to hear years ago. That something is going on, something that we can both leverage and amplify and move forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an opportunity, with this pandemic of COVID and this pandemic of racism and this, all of that stuff. There's an opportunity. And I think we have the opportunity, via, everybody on Zoom and streaming now and doing all of that. I think there's an opportunity for things to shift, but it also is a decision, because you can hear but really not listen, and you can listen but not change.
Thank you.
And so I think it really is how much are you willing to change and shift, not just in your consciousness, but in your practice, in how you do things. I mean, the power has to change. We have to shift, what we invest in, and still, there's still not enough investment in healing. There's not enough investment in rites of passage for young men. There's not a lot of investment in fatherhood. There is some, but there's not. And at the same time, we still need to be lifting up the sense of healing that needs to be going on in women and girls. But I think that we have the medicine, we have the knowledge, we have the people that can lead that, but that now has to shift. And we're getting all kinds of signs that says if we don't heal, we'll continue to feel this trauma.
I don't know about you, Dennis, but I could keep this conversation going for another 2 hours.
2 hours, and I would barely even begin to scratch the surface. So how
true.
would you know, Jerry, what would be the indicators that would let you know that Clay and I were willing to do that work and work on ourselves? How do you know that those of us who are, and while Clay has been in this work longer, I have been in the work through my own personal work in recovery and the work that I've done over the decades. Clay has been in the work, you've been doing the work, the Circle of Men, and doing the after difficult and trauma. And it was so interesting. What you described about the 5-year-old and the trust and that feeling is the story that Clay has told me over and over again from his. It was like you were speaking his words about trusting men out of your mouth.
Yeah, I so felt that expressed from a different frame of reference, and at the same time,
it was exactly your story. It was the same. Yeah, and that's where, Jerry, I'm so grateful to have met you now, because I feel, because everything that you're saying, I keep going into, I'm reminded, this is not new knowledge. When you talk, it echoes within me, and I go, yes, I knew that. Yes, that's the truth. I knew that truth. This is not new to me, even though I'm hearing these words from you from the first time. But there's a deep echo inside of me that says, yes.
Well, you asked a question, and so let me share with you. I think part of the reflection is in the people that are around us.
I mean, how do our children see us? How do our relationships see us? And they are the evaluators of who we are. Because we can be real good on a podcast and real good in a presentation, but
I'm right, but
when you go home, what is the reality there? And I think that I have to be real conscious of even within the realm of me knowing and living and doing my healing, I have to be very conscious of the balance and the duality. Even how much I speak, how much space I take, who I invite to be part of things, because it's very easy as a man for me. I get invited many times, but my role is to really make sure that the voices that are heard are the entire circle, and it may not be my voice. It may be my companion's voice. It may be my daughter's voice. It may be my grandson. I mean, whoever it is. It may be the other people in this circle. And I think that inclusive in that is people from other ethnicities and other cultures too. That we are now knowing and recognizing that we're interconnected and our pain is interconnected that way. So I think that's the way. I think what you invest in, the time, how much in time do you invest in really doing your own work, and how much time do you invest in healing your own families and your relationships, and then I think it's all about all of those things. In my recent book, Recovering Your Sacredness, I talk about some of these things, and one of the things I talk about is that the first step of acknowledging yourself as sacred. And what does that mean if you see yourself as sacred? What does that mean if you hold yourself as sacred? How do you carry yourself? How do you speak? What do you do, and what do you never do? And some of that takes forgiveness. Some of that takes some changing of behavior. Some of that means that we have to stop doing certain things. And some of it means we need to start doing certain things. As simple as greeting in the morning, is as simple as acknowledging Creator, as simple as taking a walk and recognizing that that we're so grateful for being here in this universe, and for grandfather son greeting us for another day. So it's simple that way, but it's also complex, and I think that's part of the journey. So I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you, Jerry, for this lovely time, for you taking this 1 hour that you could have spent anywhere on the planet, that you chose to spend it with us. And I'm so grateful for that. My heart is open, my mind is open, and I'm deeply vulnerable from spending this time with you, Clay.
I'm so grateful that you did take this hour, Jerry, and I, with all my heart, would like to invite you back.
Yes, and as we'll continue the journey, and so there will be an after show for anyone who wants to stick around, but for right now, we're going to close this episode of In Search of the New Compassionate Male. I'm Dennis Tardan. This is Clay Boykin, our guest, Jerry Tello, and we'll see you next time.
What a fascinating hour. Golly, at the very end, you were talking about the first thing is to recognize that we're sacred.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say the first thing is to recognize that you're wounded.
No.
And I so appreciate what you said and how you shared that. And that was very profound for me. The other thing, and I welcome if you have the time to expand on it, when you're talking about rites of passage and the mother taking the son to the bridge.
Yeah.
You were also talking about, this is not, Rite of Passage is not about, well, it is about the person, but it's not about me. It's not about the individual. It's more about, I believe, the community.
Yeah.
And that is, I guess, again, I guess I kind of knew that, but in all the times this past year in the podcast, when Rites of Passage comes up, we think of the young man going out for the ordeal.
Yeah,
And
Robert Bly and all of his. Yeah,
that's right. And could you contrast the guy, because there's something there.
I mean, there is, when you cross that bridge, there is a sense of having to search for your sacred purpose. But it's not separate from community and generational legacy and generational responsibility and generational trauma.
Right.
I mean, so I think the difficulty that I had with a lot of other people's manhood stuff and man box and all that other stuff it's very Western.
Yes.
And it's nice. It sounds good. We're in a man box and we got to get these. No, that's not the issue. The issue is not those are issues, but if you don't have the rooted framework of what the journey is about, then what are you doing? We just eliminate the patriarchy and you're fine? No. No. The relationship to the universe is important. The relationship to each other is important. And so I think that Rites of Passage is having the space to be able to explore all of those things.
Right. So many of the men's group models, and again, this is primarily the Western view, are there to break into the man, to get him to recognize his heart, whether it's a Jungian model or the Robert Bly or mass movement or however you want to call it, is trying to break into. And one thing that I discovered in my healing journey, first, that I don't trust other men. I didn't trust other men. I was already in my heart. I didn't need somebody to break into that. No, I was already in my heart. It was already there. How do I bring that out when society, patriarchy, and whatever presses that down? And so the circle that we have sounded very similar to what you were talking about with the Compadres Network. Now, I can't compare, but what you were talking about, the men opening up and the tears, that the texture of the compassion that is there in that opening, that space, that safe space for another man, for men to be encircled together, not to be judged, not to be fixed, but to open is what we attempt to do in our circle, in our own way.
I think there's another part too, though, that we never talk about and we never explore. As a young man, not having that model, but seeing my father in his woundedness be so harsh. He was very harsh to my mom, and I saw men in their harsh, and I didn't like that. It hurt me to see men. And so I went to the other side, and I became very gentle, very giving, very loving, and to the extent that all the girls saw me as their friend. I was their best friend, right?
Right.
And the problem with that is when I wanted to date them, they saw me as a brother and not as a date.
Yeah.
And I got taken advantage of a lot because I was so much in my heart. I was so much in wanting to be liked and wanting to be admired by them that I would not say my truth. I would not put my boundaries. I would not require anything. And so you have men that are very much in their heart, very compassionate, that get taken advantage of.
And a lot of women in couples counseling that we do say, well, why do I always have to make the decisions? He can't even make a decision. We want to go eat. Where do you want to go eat, honey? Well, you choose. No, but I won't.
I'm never guilty of that.
He has no backbone. Yeah. So what we've seen as the other part is we have a generation of men that are very much in their heart.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a wounded heart. Right? It's a wounded sense of compassion. And sometimes we have to tell these men, suck it up, fool. Come on, stand up, say something. Speak your truth. Go to the masculine side. You're always in the feminine. What's wrong? Well, you're afraid to go to the masculine. Why? And so that the thing is not to go to the wounded masculine side, but sometimes you need, and women say, I want to feel safe with him.
Right.
I don't feel safe with him. Right? Because, he gets emotional all of a sudden, or he gets nervous, or, and it's like, he doesn't want to say. And sometimes I just need him to say, hey, we're doing this, let's go and do this. And, and I'll push back, but I like, no, next time you do that, we'll do it. I like that, and so, and that's not patriarchy, so I think that there's a deeper level of this discussion that, and I've had this discussion with women. We assume that all women are healed and balanced. That's not true. But the Western society has made us the wounded ones and them the healed ones. So we're always to blame for everything, right? If we're going to really do this healing, we really need to do this healing across the board. And so I think there's some,
well, one thing that I've had close experience with, is with an organization called Gender Equity and Reconciliation International.
Yeah.
And having gone through the facilitators training with them and being engaged with them for, almost a couple of years now, that recognition that our common thread between men and men and women and women and women and men is that we all are wounded.
Yeah.
Not comparing whose wound is worse. That's not relevant, but recognizing that we all have a carrier wound. And if we can see one another from that frame of reference and that common ground, then perhaps we can see one another and treat one another differently.
Well, but what I would add to that is what you started off by saying. There also needs to be that we all are sacred.
That's
and if women cannot see men as sacred, the game is over. I get called into organizations or Head Start or we want to get more men involved. We want to get more fathers involved. And I'm saying, are you sure? You really want more men here? Yeah, we want to do more. Are you sure? When men come in here, we change the energy.
Yeah.
We're going to be different. Do you really want to do that? Well, but not this certain man. Wait. And women ask me, can women facilitate men's groups? Sure. As long as you love us, as long as you don't hate us, as long as you're not resentful to us. If you're angry at us, if you're resentful, you can't run a group with us.
Yeah.
That's not one that's going to help us. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done across the board,
Absolutely.
But I appreciate, you having this. Appreciate if you could also announce the Healing Generations podcast, and you listen to it too. There's some really good people on it that.
Absolutely.
And also the book, Recovering Your Sacred.
Yes. And when I do the video, I will take and put that book up.
Okay, great.
And also the National Compadre Network, if there's a logo or something like that, I'll embed all of that in there.
Great.
So I'm in service to you in that respect.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
All right.
So thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
Peace.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.